Generally, there is a perception that the ones who excel in a particular subject have a tendency to think outside the box. This is true, but contrary to this popularly held belief, if one wants to excel in CSS, he must think inside the box. Because at its core, understanding CSS is all about understanding the CSS box model. Here is a basic HTML page that contains headings, paragraphs, and within paragraphs, there are words enclosed inside the strong and M elements. And we also now know that the headings and paragraphs are block level elements while strong and M are inline level elements. Now let me show outlines outside all these elements so that you can see how CSS will treat as if it lived inside its own box. CSS allows us to create rules that control the way each individual box and its contents are presented. CSS allows us to create rules that control the way that each individual box and its contents are presented. Using CSS, we can specify the width, height, text color, and formatting and the background of any individual box. Let's view our sample page in the browser and then start applying the style to each individual box. As we see that none of the elements shown in the browser has a border around it because border for each individual box is turned off by default. We can turn on the border by applying the CSS styling of border. Let's apply border to all the elements. We begin by applying border to the heading 1 element, and we know that it's a good idea to apply CSS in a separate CSS file. Therefore, we'll apply all our styling in box.css. To apply border to the heading 1 element, we'll write the h1 selector, then opening and closing brackets, and then the property value pair for border. For border, we mentioned three properties. What is the width of the border in pixels? What is the style of the border, as it can be solid, dotted, or dashed, and what is the color of the border line? Let's apply red color to the heading 1 border, save it and load into the browser. And what's this? We don't see any border at all, while it should have been here because we had applied the border property to the heading 1 element. Is there a mistake that we have made? Definitely. But let me tell you that I have made this mistake deliberately because many beginners make this mistake and then keep changing their code to find and correct any possible errors. But when they don't find any, they end up pulling their hair and cursing the computer. So to keep your hair intact and to appreciate that the problem is never with the computer and always within, let me point out the mistake that we are committing. And the mistake is we have not linked the CSS file with the HTML file. As we already know that to link the CSS file, we write code inside the link element, and that is inside the head of HTML document. And since our CSS file is in its own folder, to connect it to HTML, we'll first write the relationship equals to style sheet, type equals to text/CSS, then the value of href. Since CSS file is in its own folder, so we will write // first to get out of the HTML folder. Then to get inside the CSS folder, we'll write CSS. Then slash and then the name of the file, that is box.css. Now save the file and load into the browser. And we see that the heading has now the border applied to it. Okay, let's apply border to the rest of the HTML elements. We'll first write the selector, that is P, then the opening and closing brackets, then the border colon 1 pixel, solid, and green. Let's also apply border to the inline elements, that is strong. Border 1 pixel solid and its value to say something like blue. Save it and load into the browser. And we see that each individual element inside the HTML document has a border applied to it. Now let's change the background color of all the paragraphs from the default white to red. Get inside the box.css. Set the background color value of paragraph to red. Save it and load into the browser, and now we see that the background of all the paragraphs has changed. Notice that the strong and M elements that were inside the third paragraph also appear to be red. They actually aren't red, but because they are inside the paragraph, therefore they are looking like red. Let's change the background of the sentence enclosed in the strong element. We'll do that by changing the background color of the strong element, and let's change it to something like light pink. Save it and load into the browser, and now we see that the color of the inline level element, that is strong, has changed from red to the one that we set. Let's change the width and height of all the paragraphs, and also the color of text. Width 500 pixels, height 250 pixels, color should be a contrasting one, and that's white. Save it and load into the browser, and now all the paragraphs have spacious dimensions with background of red and the foreground color of red and our desired widths and heights. So we can see that using CSS we can change and affect anything that is inside an element. Thanks for watching.